A short introduction into citizen science. Just to give you an idea, I have no idea how familiar you all are with citizen science and citizen science projects. So it's really a short introduction in what you can see what citizen science is. And go to the next slide. Just an introduction. When you look for citizen science, you find a lot of definitions, a lot of descriptions, and mostly these are the keywords that you can find or that you find when you are looking for citizen science inspiration. It's all about research, of course. Science is also a word that is used a lot when looking for citizen science. Scientists, of course. Volunteers is also coming up a lot. Non-professional as another word for the volunteers. It's all about real-world questions, activities. It's also used a lot in their public, crowdsourced, and also it's all about understanding science and for the citizens. And these are the words that you encounter a lot when looking for citizen science. You can find, as I said before, a lot of definitions. I have introduced here, or I will introduce here, two definitions which are a bit the same. One is that you can find on Wikipedia. A good source of definitions is Wikipedia. And the main words there are indeed community science, crowd science. It's all about scientific research by an amateur or a non-professional or a volunteer. It's also sometimes described as public participation in scientific research or participatory monitoring and participatory action research. A lot of difficult or long words, but the outcomes are often advancements in scientific research by both improving the scientific community's capacity and also increasing the public understanding of science, which is still a bit vague or abstract, but it gives you an idea what citizen science could be. There's also a green paper, a European green paper on citizen science for Europe. It's a bit old already, 2013, so it's quite some years ago that it was developed. But citizen science define a series of activities that link the general public with scientific research. I think that this linking is quite important here. And it's all, again, about volunteers and non-professionals that are contributing to scientific projects to answer real-world questions. Both citizens contribute and the researchers' attitudes encompass a wide set of activities at multiple scales. That set of activities, that's something, that's my next slide, that is quite some discussion about. What are then that type of activities that are related to citizen science activity? What is the focus of the scope of that activities? And how to understand the role of the volunteers or the citizens within these activities? Not so clear yet. And how to compile then citizen science teams. Who are the involved citizens? Who needs to be involved? Who do we want to be involved? Who do we want the researchers to be involved, etc., etc. A question that I did not put in here, but I noted it down from the Mentimeter, is the quality control or the check on quality that maybe can be a challenge or a question that I did not put here, but it's I've noted it and I think it's quite important to take that into account. Well, you can find a lot of examples on citizen science projects. I tried to give you a short overview of citizen science using a specific technology because there are some catalogs. You can find a lot of citizen science inspiration and you can get lost in there, completely get lost and get a lot of inspiration indeed, but you need to have some focus. And if you look for the American catalog, into the American catalog, if you use the field of science transportation, then you can find 9 projects. And in the European catalog, it's about 8 projects on transportation. But still get lost in there. This citizen science project weekend will be explored a lot more later by Chris. But I will give you an idea with some figures on what this weekend project is all about. It's all about live traffic counting by citizens. It's a real citizen science project. You can find some numbers on the right side there. how many people are involved in Leuven and Spain. It's a citizen science project in Leuven, in Madrid, in Dublin, Cardiff, and Ljubljana. There are a lot of people involved, a lot of events set up, and the next slide will show you some more numbers about the citizens' experience in WeCount, because that was one of the focus, or is one of the focuses, to explore a lot that citizens' experience in WeCount, engage the difficult to reach. That was also a challenge or a target there. And there you can find some numbers also on the motivation to participate in a WeCount, in that WeCount project. And there you can see that being a part of a research project is a very important aspect there, but also using that specific technology that WeCount is using, which is called the Telram technology, is also an important motivation for a lot of people there. But also just counting traffic and have that data there is also an important motivation. You can see also that reaching the difficult to reach is still a challenge. And if we look back to the Mentimeter and enhance social cohesion by using citizen science, it is a challenge, and it will be a challenge, I think, everywhere. It was one of the focus in WeCount, but it's still, we did not succeed completely in developing or contributing to that social cohesion, because you can see that most of the participants are highly educated. It's a specific age group also, and the gender is mostly male and less female, so challenges there. Other interesting or inspirational citizen science projects is this one. Curieuze Neuze also used a specific technology to measure NO2 by citizen scientists that had to put that tubes on their window. It was done by 20,000 people in Flanders in 2018. And you can find a lot of numbers and a lot of information online. These links into these reports will be shared afterwards because it's in the presentation. And another interesting citizen science project is Clare City, where they looked for if understanding their personal behavior and being involved in the decision-making process would change their personal travel behavior, heating their homes behavior and future aspiration, and would make it easier to adopt into greener lifestyles. So it's a bit of a combination on involving them in understanding their own behavior and the impact of their own behavior, and how to be involved in the decision-making process. And there are also some numbers there on citizens' involvement within this Clare City project. And here you can see some interesting notes that the engagement is really important, and within the citizen science projects, that the more participants stated their understanding had improved, the more likely they were intending to change their own behavior, which is really important, I think. I will go to the next slide because I see my time is running up. And this is just an overview, just a screenshot of some other interesting, inspirational citizen science projects using a specific technology. Please have a look at them because they're really inspirational, and you can find a lot of ideas there for your own citizen science project. Voila is my end word. There you are. It was my last slide. So I will stop sharing my screen.
All right, then let's get started. So before we dive really into Telegram-like approaches, I would just want to have an overview of traffic data collection as such before we specifically use into citizen science approaches and so on. So the talk I'm having here is why would you start with traffic data collection, and some examples, some technology examples that we can dive into. So for my background, like I said just now, I'm Chris from Telegram/TM Leuven. I've been working for 15 years as a traffic transport policy consultant at TM Leuven in Leuven, close to Brussels. And obviously we have been a big user of traffic data. So we are quite experienced in why you need these things, why you need how to use them in projects, and what's out there to work with. So I've got a brief outline. I think I've got a presentation of 20-25 minutes, and then we've got some time for a discussion. So four topics here, 3 topics. Why starting with traffic counting data campaign? Then I'll dive into what type of data is around, and we'll just share a few examples, and I will then jump to the data that you can learn from Telegram specifically. So I understood from the Mentimeter in the start that we've got nice, diverse public, but a bit of emphasis on local authorities, I think. So that's good. And I think then, yeah, I don't have to explain very extensively why you would start to collect traffic data. From our experience, as we have been servicing local authorities, national authorities with studies, yeah, well, data is of course the cornerstone of any policy that you want to develop. Either it's for an assessment of a policy you want to introduce beforehand, so ex ante studies, or it is to monitor if you have done an intervention and to see if the intervention has the desired effect or undesired effects. For both of these questions, you basically need traffic data, specifically, of course, into the policy interventions that relate to mobility, and they can be quite broad. So why? I don't think we have to explain here. I think it's clear for everyone who joined the session here that there is a clear need to collect traffic data. There's a big difference now compared to say 15 years ago when traffic data was still scarce. At this point, there's a lot of technology which is coming out, which allows for the collection of much more data. So I'll give a few examples that will resonate with a few of you, and others will not, but then other examples will be more applicable for others. So an obvious one is if you want to do new infrastructure or upgrade existing infrastructure, you need data on traffic demand, existing demand, where are people going, where are people now? And the focus, of course, of new or improved infrastructure is to improve the travel times. So you want to increase the throughput or increase safety. It's not just car related, it can also be pedestrian or bike related. So the question there is what you want to measure is, are travel times indeed increasing? Is model shift indeed shifting towards, for example, pedestrians and bikes? Are we getting undesirable displacement? For example, you could do an intervention in infrastructure and which leads to a displacement of traffic to another location. For that, you also need to have data to understand if you get desirable or undesirable effects. So that's an obvious one for which you need traffic data. And then the one I think which is hot, at least now, and at least definitely in Belgium, is the circulation plans, traffic circulation plans, mostly in inner cities. So European cities are small, historical. It's difficult to manage the mix of different type of traffic. Local authorities understand this and want to improve the circulation plans, introduce car-free streets, introduce single road streets, introduce these loop streets which function as a let's say a main corridor for car traffic to pass through. So these are very tricky interventions because you don't really know how traffic will behave before. So you want to measure the actual traffic on beforehand. And if you do an intervention, you want to see if you indeed observe a change in the traffic volumes, either it's cars or pedestrians or bicycles. And then which comes out of that clearly is also red running. Sluipverkeer in Dutch, so traffic which is on small roads, which isn't supposed to be there, on roads, let's say, that are not designed to have a function of collecting a lot of traffic for over large distances. Okay, then for that you also need to understand, is there red running? Because red running is a vague term. It's not like a clear-cut definition. So when is something red running? Is there an intervention needed? Yes, no. And if you do an intervention, well, is your intervention leading to red running elsewhere? Or is it indeed successful at reducing the red running, the targeted intervention that you made? So again, you need traffic data, and you need traffic data of different types. I continue because there are quite a lot of examples, and I hope a few resonate with a few of you. So again, improved parking here. a new and remove parking again in city centers, I think this is also something which is very relevant. Do you need parking capacity? Yes or no? Is parking capacity being used to the max? What are the traffic volumes generated by a parking capacity? So that's important. And then obviously when you manage a road network, you will also experience frequent maintenances, which will lead to detours and temporary road closures. Okay, if you want to anticipate hindrance of a road closure, then yeah, it's also it's important to understand to what extent your road is being used at this point, and then you can design the best rerouting alternative routes. But again, you need data to understand what are the best options. And then to conclude, a few more on speeding. So again, was also in focus, obviously, is road safety. And road safety, you can clearly link towards the speeding of traffic, of cars, passenger cars. Where are the problems? Where's speeding? Everybody's complaining about speeding, but where is it really a problem? And then for that, you need data to understand what are the current speeds being driven. You don't have that many technologies which are able to give you the type of data, at least in an affordable way, but you need data to, well, assign, for example, your scarce enforcement capacity on those sites where there is indeed a problem. And then to conclude, traffic lights, again, that's also a trivial one, is I would say not, but the optimization of traffic lights, for that you also need detailed information on data. So my conclusion here, I've given just a few examples of for what type of interventions you would need traffic data. And for that, you basically need different types of traffic data to craft successful, effective policy interventions. So I jump now a bit towards the type of data. I can categorize them in two main types. So again, like I said earlier in my talk, if you compare the situation now to 15 years ago, the landscape has changed completely in terms of data availability. There's much more possible in terms of data to also support your policy intervention. But you can broadly categorize them in two types of data. And the first one, I would say, is flows. So, and the second ones are point counts. What is the difference? So flows are high-level aggregate data, which give you information about where are people going, where are people coming from, what are travel time data, so what are the travel times, what are the route choices. If people go from A to B, do they go a route this way, that way? Do they pick a red running trajectory? That's one part. And the second part is the actual volumes on a specific location. And those can be cars, pedestrians, again, on a specific site. Both of these data types have advantages and disadvantages. So the ones on flows, they will give you a lot of information, valuable information on travel times, which is an important indicator to work towards, and route choice. But it's impossible to collect absolute volumes with flow data, because the data which is used to support this type of information is either cell phone data, GPS data, smartphone data, and just simply not everybody has a smartphone or is using a specific app which creates a data signal. So you get some ideas. Most often you have a high enough sample to get a broad idea on the travel times for the whole population, but it will never be able to give you an idea of the absolute volumes, cars, pedestrians, whatever, on a specific location. And that's something which you want to work as well. So some policy interventions are also targeting, let's say, absolute traffic volumes on a specific location to reduce the negative impact for local residents. So for that, you need point counts. So that's very useful. You want to know exactly how many cars are driving on a specific location. It's a very close link, like I said, with the negative impacts of traffic, so noise, emissions, but also safety. But of course, a car passing by on a specific location, you don't really know if they're coming from, let's say, a car passing drive by in Leuven here at my street window here. Is it coming from Brussels? Is it coming from Liège? I basically don't know. It's just an absolute volume on a specific location. And it's actually that type of combination of this type that will give you the most valuable information for, again, crafting and evaluating policy interventions. I focus on these two, but obviously, if you want to go into traffic policy, there's a lot of other data sets which are valuable as well, which you need. For example, census data, that means population, where are people living, what are their properties, that will also be valuable to understand traffic demand, travel surveys, which are more general in nature, and land use data again. So I've taken these out because they're not specifically traffic counting data, but there's obviously much more data which is relevant. So I'll give a few examples. So here you can see an example of the Google Map, Google traffic data. So for flows, like I said, the source of all of these providers is basically the same. It's either smartphone, GPS information built in the car, yes, no, or built in your smartphone, or separate devices, but it's always something which is GPS or smartphone related. And there are plenty providers who are working with this. Obviously, Google has their own traffic API, which to some extent is open, by the way, so it's not that expensive. Only at the point that you're using a lot of data, then it starts to become pricey. There's here data, and there's also a provider which is focusing specifically on this type of data, TomTom, and you can also collect data from telco providers directly. They're selling their data, anonymized data for this type of analysis as well. So that's the type of flows, and then the point counts, which has a lot. I've seen. Maybe just back first on flows. This is completely new. So if you think 10 years ago, 12 years ago, I think these things were emerging. Maybe 15 years ago by now, I'm getting old. But these things were really emerging and non-existing 15 years ago. And now they're commonplace. And they're getting even better still with more and more users. Then on the point counts, I've seen a similar technological revolution. So what you can see here are a few examples. You can see the pneumatic loops here on the left. They're broken here in this case, but you probably have seen those or used those as already for traffic data collection. There are two lines which are on the street. There's a new technology here on the bottom right, which is the ANPR, automatic number plate recognition, camera-based systems, more expensive, more accurate. They're apps. So people can just use an app to do traffic counting. And yes, of course, we are still doing manual counting. You might think it's crazy, but still it's valuable information, although it's fragmented, but it can be, in some cases, still very, very much useful. Just a quick overview of these benefits and drawbacks of these different technologies, specifically on the point counts. So you got the manual counts again. It can be quite cheap because if you do it just on 1 or 2 hours, then it's not that expensive. It can actually be it's quite accurate because you can give targeted instructions towards the counter. But the downside, it's very fragmented. You can only count 1 hour. You cannot have 1 or 2 employees sitting a full week to do counting. Then it will start to become very expensive. But in some cases, this is enough. If you want to do, for example, intersection measurement, then this can be enough. Then pneumatic tubes are the ones I showed also earlier. They are very popular, also proven technology, being used quite a lot. And they are, they have proven their worth. On the downside, they can be inaccurate and there can be downtimes. So they're prone to defects, and then you have to send, or your supplier has to send an intervention, and they can be quite expensive if you want to use them for a long time. But again, I think these are the most popular ones at this point, at least for assessment at this point of in the context of a traffic mobility intervention. Camera-based, like I said, more accurate. These are emerging a lot, so there's more technology coming here which are camera-based. Can be fixed or mobile, so they can be there are systems which can be mobile, but they're still quite expensive. You have got some constraints of the public domain, so you need to have a clear view, obviously. But these are systems which are emerging much more. Then I'm moving to the permanent inductive loops. So maybe you've seen those, like these rectangles on streets. They are built into the road surface. They're working with the inductive loop, so they give a magnetic signal when cars pass by. Very accurate, very reliable. Of course, very expensive. So these are the ones which are being used on main arteries, on highways, and are most of the cases already embedded in, let's say, the street design, or when there's a major overhaul or an investment. But they're, like I said, quite expensive. And then to conclude, what we're here for, I think, is apps and citizen science, also very emerging. So you can do manual counting, or you can do sensor-based counting with citizens. That's something with Telegram. They are in principle zero cost, because if you want to, you can have volunteers, citizen science, which voluntarily contribute to your data collection process. But as you can see, I said €0 between brackets there, because obviously you need to also support this. The citizen science activity, but it's for a completely different nature. So you have to approach the traffic counter campaign from a completely different perspective. So it's very cheap. You get a lot of engagement as well. So you can get people on board also with your policy change process. But of course, you can't be blind for the downsides as well. It's important to understand these. You are still dependent on the goodwill of citizens which are taking part. I think Hannelore has already mentioned that. So if you want to reach people which are difficult to reach, if they don't take part, then they don't take part, or if they drop out, they drop out. So it's important to understand that as well. Your whole traffic counting approach changes. So I've got a few examples, and then I think we can jump already to open discussion with questions and answers. So I put this in here because people might think that manual counting is so 20th century, but it's still being used and it's still being valuable. So I've done one for like intersection here, but that's camera based. But on the one on the left, so you can still pay professional people, or like I said, citizens, to do manual counting with either an app or with a scheme. You can see this person here with a pre-filled in overview paper, where you can simply turf what you're counting. Useful on intersections for accurate measurements on a small time window, on sites, for example, where other technologies are not eligible. This is, for example, very broad street, so this could be important. And then I added here one on the right, so on intersection, which is emerging, replacing this mostly. That's a camera-based system where you can almost work with heat maps, and then you can see what are actual paths chosen from pedestrians, but also cars, cyclists on an intersection. Then you can start building towards that to understand if you have to do some changes on your traffic light, for example. And then obviously Telegram, I want to focus on this one here, because I think that's with citizen science and traffic counting, that's the one in scope here. Telegram, like I said, what's Telegram? It's this thing here on the left. Telegram is citizen science traffic counting, not manual, but with a sensor. And this is the sensor here on the left. It's all off-the-shelf technology, Raspberry Pi based, so quite cheap. I think the sensor technology is less than €100 in terms of component cost, so quite cheap. And it can, once installed, it can count traffic continuously for pedestrians, cyclists, cars, and large vehicles. This is just one part of the story. The thing on the right here is the more important part of the story. How do you manage your community? How do you make sure that these people install these devices themselves? Because that's what they have to do. I think later in the talk, right before we go into the practical assignment, I'll go over the approach, how we do it with Telegram, and how we think that it's a very suitable approach. But it's important here that this is just small part of it. This is more important. How do you engage citizens to install this sensor? I want to give a few examples of the data, because this presentation is still on data. What kind of data you can learn from Telegram. So like I said, this is an example of Telegram output from one example. As you can see immediately, it's a long time series. So once installed, it can count traffic for a long period of time. So that's valuable. You have absolute volumes both of cars, pedestrians and cyclists. This is a particular interesting case because there was a telegram installed on a street which functioned as a detour for cyclists for roadworks. So there was a major infrastructure intervention on a main artery, and which was also being used by bikes, and bikes used a different route to avoid these. And what's interesting here is this is a route actually chosen which was not designed as to be the alternative route for the bicycles, but bicycles have found a different way and took a different road as compared to what the proposed alternative route was. So if you have this in advance, or you see this as an effect, you can steer, you can adjust your intervention to change this. And it's always, this is bikes, so it's not cars, something which is in terms of roadworks often neglected. Also bicycles need to have an alternative route, not just cars. What's interesting here, just like it's maybe more of a gimmick, but it's interesting. This is actually in Graz where the annual marathon passed by. So we got like a huge spike in pedestrians. You can actually see the first wave here because these are hourly resolutions. Those are the fast guys and those are the laggards. So that's also a type of information that you can collect if you have a telegram installed on the parking, on the parcours. Again, here another event. This was not a detour, but there was an incident. So this was a telegram on a side road of a main road, and on the main road there was an incident with and the road had to be closed for a few hours, and you could see that there was like a huge spike in traffic because people had to reroute via the small road. You could see this impact immediately. So this is something which could, for example, trigger a police intervention to take care of traffic in this particular route because it's clearly not designed for these volumes. And then what's I think very nice about Telegram is the information about speeds. So you can get an impression of the speed of passing cars in Belgium, at least. I think it's elsewhere in Europe the same. Zone 30, at least in inner cities, is a popular concept. Maximum speed of 30 kilometers per hour. But enforcement of these regimes is a different thing, and obviously they are not adhered to a lot or always. Then it's interesting to have telegrams deployed throughout your city to understand on what locations the non-compliance, let's say, of speed limits, either it's zone 50, zone 30, whatever, is a real problem. And then you can use your telegram devices as, let's say, a first alert on, okay, this side is maybe a problem. There's a lot of cars there and a lot of cars are speeding. Okay, I will commit my enforcement capacity. I will commit the police to these and these sites for location. You can also narrow the scope in terms of timing. For example, the problems are mostly in the morning or in the afternoon. Okay, then you can be quite flexible with your enforcement capacity. So that was my talk, my intro talk, mostly on data, just to give a bit background and also jumping to what Telegram can be. So yeah, I had an open question here, but an open question. So what solutions have you been working already with for data collection? Why and for what purpose? And why are you, for example, considering Telegram or citizen science as an alternative?
So good morning, everybody. My name is Giovanni Maccani. I work at Ideas for Change, and I apologize not being able to do this presentation live, but I'll be unfortunately unavailable on September 2nd. It's a pity because the agenda looks really interesting, and I wish you all the best for the day. So today I'm going to talk for the next 20-30 minutes about citizen engagement, and specifically how we've conducted citizen engagement in the WeCount project, which you've heard about in the previous presentations. And I'll talk to you more about what is the methodology that we've followed and the framework that we've developed, as well as the tools to effectively engage citizens in the project. So I'm going to share my screen with my presentation. Let's see if I can make it. So it should be fine now. So as said, my name is Giovanni Maccani. I work at Ideas for Change in the research team. A little bit about my background is in engineering. I've studied in Italy. I have a master in engineering, and then I moved to Ireland, where I worked for Intel for a couple of years. Then I became faculty in a business school again for a couple of years. And back in 2019, I moved to Barcelona, and I joined Ideas for Change. So Ideas for Change is an SME based here in Barcelona, Spain, and what we focus on is basically two main pillars, research and consultancy. I work in the research sides, whereby we focus, well, we have different focuses. We've been involved in several European and non-European projects, but I guess one of our main expertise and experiences is about citizen engagement and citizen science, which you've heard about. And this is the idea of engaging citizens in every steps of a scientific inquiry, basically, in scientific research. So just as some examples of projects we've been or we are involved in. So one is Cities Health, where we leverage citizen science to investigate the relationship between exposure to air pollution and mental health, in collaboration with the Public Health Institute here in Barcelona. It's called IS Global. The project is almost finishing. Another one is food mapping. And the idea here was to leverage citizen science to understand how people experience food environments and how people can contribute to improve them towards more inclusive, sustainable, and healthy food environments and related experiences. In this project, we asked communities to go and do shopping for a given recipe, which was a lentil soup, chosen because it has a lot of ingredients, and with an app people were documenting their experience, where they were going, when, why, how much they spent. And then we did a workshop of cooking together, where we cooked that lentil soup and we reached some conclusions about food environments here in Barcelona. Denosis, another one, it's about odor pollution. Again, novelty for the environmental policy discourse in many countries. Odors are something that annoy us every day. And the power here through citizen science is about mapping odors episodes, and then through retrotrajectory techniques of factometry as well as dispersion modeling, try and trace it back to the emitting activities, create dialogues between them, the citizen community, and the local councils to improve their practices, basically. And finally, another project we've been involved in is DLT4EU, which was an accelerator of blockchain-based technology for social innovation. Again, a key focus on citizens. The idea, again, is engaging citizens in every steps of a research inquiry, right? And we've done that across a number of fields, including WeCount. That's in the context of sustainable mobility. So this presentation then will focus about really what was the foundation of engagement and citizen science in WeCount, what was the methodology, as well as some examples of how we've conducted that. So what we're going to talk about really is what we've developed that we call the WeCount engagement framework. So again, WeCount, as you've probably heard, was is still a project that's developed across 5 different countries: Spain, Slovenia, Wales, Ireland, and obviously Belgium. So the idea is that when you involve citizens in a research project, what you need to face is really that, especially when you have this distributed pilots or case studies type of project, is that every single context is particular. Every single context has its own issues, its own communities, its own demographics, its own policies, of course. And so the challenge for us was really to devise what we call a methodology or a framework that could guide local citizen science activities, could inspire local case study or pilot leaders in engaging citizens effectively, but at the same time acknowledging that it needed to be flexible enough to be applicable across different contexts. So the idea came about not to focus on a strict step-by-step recipe book or methodology, but really focusing on the concept of toolkit. The idea is to give 5 different phases, a number of sub-phases with the key things that need to be addressed across the different phases of citizen engagement and scientific research, and propose within them a number of methods, techniques, and tools on how to address the different objectives within each phase, but in a way that this could be adapted to the local context. It's not just translations, but really adapting it to what people believe is relevant, or what their experiences tell us is relevant. So the 5 phases included are scoping, community building, co-design, data collection, data analysis, and awareness, reflection, and legacy. I'm going to go through each of these with some examples of tools and other methods that we've developed and used across the different case studies. So first one, scoping and community building. Really, the idea here at the beginning is to really bring down the project narrative to something that's locally relevant. How do we engage locally? How do we understand the local context? How do we position the initial narrative in the local context? So the initial project narrative for WeCount was about empowering citizens to count traffic in front of their street, to have a voice and influence policymaking when it comes to sustainable mobility in the area where they live, or they work, or they spend time. So from this initial narrative, this needed to be brought down to the local level. So what does it mean, traffic counting? Traffic counting, obviously, by nature, can have different legs. Could be road safety, could be speed compliance, could be urban design, among space usage, among other issues or other topics that can be addressed. So the idea here is to really get an understanding of what's the mobility context in the city or in the area where the case study is carried out, as well as engaging citizens to make them, to co-create a problem formulation phase together with them, based on how they experience mobility, how they experience traffic, and what their matter of concern really is. So what goes in here? So first of all, what we need to do is to really achieve a situated understanding of the traffic issue. So what we did basically in every city is start with general desk research and try and understand, okay, first of all, what is the general perception within the city? How do you perceive traffic? Is it a problem? Is it not? When is it? What worries you the most? Is it about health? Is it about time? Is it about, what is it about? Safety? So that already allows you to narrow it down to the specific context, basically. Also, in parallel to this, what we needed to do at this stage was to really try and engage the different relevant departments within the public authority. So what is it, the matter of concerns that's emerging from citizens? Is it health? Is it road safety? If that's the road safety, we needed to engage with the road safety department in Barcelona City Council. Together with it, and that's a very good example, comes from Wales and the pilot or the case study in Cardiff, we needed really to understand what is the framework or the landscape, the policy landscape with respect to mobility. This was not only useful for us to understand and position the project within the current policy framework, but really to gain credibility with both public sector and the citizens in terms of we know what we're talking about and what we're targeting. Second subphase within the scoping and community building is to really engage citizens and co-create the problem formulation. So how do they perceive mobility? What are the issues that they experience every day? By doing so, also, you start building the community. So what we've done for this case was, for this phase, was really to have a problem formulation workshop. And what we've given them initially was a canvas that's depicted here on the right side, that really, we call it traffic timeline. And we were asking people, that was an online meeting, so they could use the Miro software to put their own post-its, but really, how does your neighborhood move during the day? And what's the mobility like during the year? So people could start and populate this canvas with, at 9 a.m., there's a high load of traffic. At 8 p.m. as well, people coming back from work. At 1 a.m., there's the bins collector that come and make noise. And the same during the year. So this not only allowed us to understand what's the perceived mobility within the area where citizens live, but also to stimulate a discussion, right? And that was really fruitful. So by the end of this exercise, we were really able to narrow down the mobility issue as perceived by citizens and narrow it down across different matters of concern. Actually, what came out in Barcelona and Madrid was that air quality was the main effect of traffic that was concerning people. In conjunction to that, we were also asking them, okay, let's think together. How would it be your ideal mobility situation in your street? Just to get a target and a to-be opinion, I guess, from the citizens involved. Third is really, once you understood and you started building your community, you understood how traffic is perceived, you start bringing it down to a number of matter of concern, you start looking also at who are the stakeholders in this ecosystem. And this is not only stakeholders in terms of people that have an influence on policy or companies that have an influence on mobility in general, but really trying to think also who are the actors that could be involved, who could potentially be our community champions. So what we did in Barcelona is we used Google Maps and we mapped every single civic organization, NGO, official station of air quality, as well as other entities that could have been engaged into the project or could have been relevant for at some phases during the case study. So obviously, in parallel to all this, there needs to be a continuous effort on community building. This comes mainly from communication and dissemination effort, but it's really important to produce materials in local language, souvenirs, flyers, posters. We have a We Count sticker, for example, that we were pasting around the city. We developed a website in Spanish for the Spanish community. But really here, it's about conducting and sustaining a coherent and long-lasting communication effort. especially in projects like European projects, where case studies are usually scheduled to last more than 1 year. This is of crucial importance throughout the project. So it may be relatively easy to convince people to come to the first workshop, but the most difficult part is to keep the engagement, keep the motivation of participants throughout the project. So my argument is always, it's more difficult to get people to come to your second workshop than to the first, right? So by the end of this scoping and community building, what we achieved was basically a positioning of the WeCount narrative within the context of Barcelona and Madrid and of the other different case studies. And we started building a community which met, which also co-explored what the main problems experience could be. One thing that happened in Barcelona, well, at the end of these exercises, what we've achieved was that traffic and air quality was the main concern that emerged from the different interactions that we had, but also an urban design problem that's specifically related to the Telegram technology that's being used. So basically, the urban design in Barcelona is different than northern countries and Belgium specifically, in that buildings are typically higher, there's a lot of balconies, and in short, it was really hard to find suitable locations for the sensors. So what we decided to do was we really wanted to engage more people than those that could actually host the sensor and generate good data. So we integrated another initiative whereby we distributed 1,000 strawberry plants that were acting as air quality monitoring stations. So the idea was that participants received a plant, and after 3 months they needed to cut a leaf that was put into an envelope, sent to a laboratory that was doing a electromagnetic analysis on the material that's on the leaf, basically, and giving back information about the quality, the air quality on their balconies or windows. So this may seem deviating from the scope of WeCount, but really the most important thing was first to accommodate the request of citizens to cross traffic data with air quality data, but secondly also to allow people that did not have a sensor, a Telegram sensor, to engage into the project. Also, another issue that occurred obviously was COVID, and that required a lot of resilience from all the partners in terms of that this methodology, as well as all the other resources and the plans for the project, were developed thinking about a lot of hands-on activities, physical workshops, and so on. These were not possible, so we needed to be resilient, and we moved online. So all the workshops, interactions have happened online on video conferencing. We've used several different software, and for the delivery of sensors, we've designed a WeCount toolbox that was distributed to citizens or delivered to citizens that applied and were found to be suitable through bike delivery. But I guess the point here is that this is all agile process, right? So you can have a methodology, a framework, but then you need to be flexible. You need to adapt it to the different situations. And actually, the COVID situation demanded a lot of resilience from all the partners in WeCount. Second part is co-design. So once you have your community, your problem established, your stakeholders mapped, and understanding of what's the context like, also from a policy perspective, you start a co-design effort. Again, it's important to include citizens in this effort for several reasons. First of all, they understand what the process will look like. They understand what commitment is expected by them. They can plan in advance on when and how they want to participate. So first of all, we need to co-design the data collection protocol. So we had the sensor that was pretty much given, and that has a wonderful suite of features, if that makes sense, that you've learned about. So how many cars, pedestrians, bicycle, trucks pass in front, at what speed, at what time, and different types of visualizations that you've seen, right? So here it was really about, okay, let's have a calendar. Let's see how long data collection protocol will last, when we will have workshops, when we will have different interactions, and what do we ask to do, right? Also in this stage, what we did was we could not undertake a workshop where people were installing the sensors, which was actually assembling the sensors, which was actually a key part of the methodology for people to get aware of what they were using, and also to appreciate the fact that they were part of an experimentation, of an experimental project. This was not being possible, but we did produce some material and tutorials on how the sensors are assembled to allow people to appreciate what they're doing and what's the sensor they're using, and to learn about Internet of Things, of course. Second thing was about supplying and installing Telegram. So in this case, what we did was, obviously, we could not do it again in person, and also it wouldn't have been possible because people have to do it from their home. So here, what we did at the project level was we produced a kind of considerable amount of material that targeted for different type of demographics. So there was the Telegram website that was providing a guideline, step-by-step guideline. There was a video for the installation. We produced a printed step-by-step guide, and also a longer, well, from the initial experiences, it emerged the need to produce also a longer spoken installation tutorial, especially for elderly people and people that are not as digitally savvy. So at this point, an important element here was about what we call the train-the-trainer approach. So what we were trying to do here was to supply or deliver sensors to what we call community champions, so they could experience it, learn about it, and then transfer it to their own networks and communities. Third and important aspect is also about the project governance and the data governance of the project. So especially in Telegram, one of the concerns that emerged, I think it was in Ljubljana and some participants in Spain as well, was about perceived security or privacy issue. You have a camera in your house, you have a sensor that's connected to your network, you don't really know what's going on to your data. So it's important that people, first of all, get to know what data is collected and how it is managed, but also when possible for them to have a voice on how to design the data governance model. So is it possible? And if it's possible, we recommend always to decide together with citizens how the data license should look like. So give them the empowerment to decide what data to share, with whom, and under what condition. With respect to project governance, a tool that we've been using and that's been used also in Leuven in Belgium is what we call the contribution canvas. So people here map or position themselves in terms of how they want to participate, how much dedication they can give to the project, what skills they can bring, and what resources they can bring into the project. So people start defining themselves in terms of their commitment that they want or they're willing to give to the project. And also the project team, so ourselves, were able to design different strategies for different types of participants. That's when data collection starts. So sensors have been delivered and have been measuring ever since in the 5 different cities. And what we recommend to do at this point is really 2 things. One is trying and gather also qualitative data about mobility. So sometimes data provided by the sensor is hard data, and it's hard to be interpreted. If there was a protest, an event, data might look different. So what we stimulated users to do was to also take note of events or other episodes that might have influenced the data. So we did that through what we call data journals. So people were writing down on day X, this has happened, and this might have led to these numbers in the sensors. That's very good, and that's very useful at the end when you have to interpret the data. In parallel to this, TML together with Mobile21 developed an amazing help desk via the Zendesk application, which was available in every language where the case studies were being conducted, and a list of structured FAQs and assistance was provided. Also, it included a system where people could report and the backend management of requests and feedback that we were receiving. This was of fundamental importance for the project, because this was really where we needed to put an effort with people that were experiencing problems, and people tend not to be patient, especially when it comes to technology, and they're kind of deterministic in that sense. So if it works, good. If it doesn't work, the technology is not good. So this is where we really had to engage with them and conduct a lot of interactions one-to-one to keep the community alive and to keep the sensors working. When it comes to analysis and awareness, now data collection lasted for several months in all the different pilot cities. People were continuing to generate data. We were continuing to keep the community engaged through periodic communication, newsletters, data updates, and so on and so forth. And then it comes about the time to do data analysis and awareness. In this case, different, methods have been used across the different cities, because it's basically informed from the previous phases, right? So what was the main problem perceived by citizen has to inform how the analysis is being conducted. What's important here is that the analysis must be conducted together with citizens, right? So data discussion sheets, awareness sheets were developed to try and engage citizens in conducting this analysis itself. So there was one part that we conducted independently that was more technical, and then was another part that was asked to be done by citizens. So usually this happened in a way that we were providing them templates to go on the platform and explore their data and draw some conclusions. At this point also, an effort could be done in terms of, and is done in terms of try and leverage the WeCount platform and the data that's been supplied to the platform as a new source for new applications, so that the platform has a public API, so people can download data in near real time in machine readable format. And here the idea is to really stimulate different uses of the data generated. Also at this stage, since you engage citizens, it's time to try and think about impact. So what is the data telling you? How can we act upon the data? And in this sense, every city developed its own strategy. We were given several interviews and survey templates by another work package from UWE within WeCount to investigate that in depth. Finally, a reflection and legacy. So it's important that there is a closing to the project, and it's important to plan for the sustainability for the continuity of it, if that makes sense. So what is the legacy of WeCount in the different case studies? Well, obviously, there is a legacy at the project level, which is obviously the sensor, the improved platform, all the different tools that we've been developing. And this is basically, the legacy aims at one main objective, which is enabling others to undertake a similar experience in an autonomous fashion, meaning give them all the resources they need to do a WeCount like case studies in their own context, addressing their own issues with their own communities. So obviously here, a big role is played by dissemination effort, but also the idea of trying to think, okay, what can we do with this data? How can we create an action? How can we stimulate change? Here, there's a number of tools that we've used, and then we've also conducted in Madrid and Barcelona final action, which I'll talk about in a few minutes. So first of all, we use what we call the future times. So this was an instrument that we used with participants in which they were writing basically an article or a headline and an article of a newspaper from 2023. And the idea was to describe a new mobility or sustainable mobility scenario and how we got there from the data collected and analyzed during WeCount. So it tells a story, a future stories of what happens from now to the ideal mobility situation. Leuven and Mobile 21 have developed another instrument in this sense that's called the Rambabble, which I think is the Flemish for window chat. And this is the idea of developing a method to stimulate discussions among neighbors, which ultimately are believed to induce to action. And then finally, again, plan for the legacy of the project. One idea was to encapsulate all the resources that we've done within WeCount and then upload them on Zenodo on existing platforms so that others can use them, but also give some sort of acknowledgement to participants, right? So we did a graduation ceremony during the final event. An important thing, and then I finish, I think I'm out of time, is about what we've done with citizens in Barcelona and Madrid. So at the end of the data analysis and awareness workshop, what we've done was we asked them to brainstorm ideas for a final action. And basically what emerged from that was 3 different ideas. One was about extending the platform, one was about a social media campaign, and one was about an analog campaign done on the street. Then from there, what we did was we sent these 3 ideas for an online voting campaign to the rest of the participants that did not take part of the workshop, as well as to other, beyond what was the WeCount database, contact database. So what resulted was that the analog intervention was the one that was most voted. So we asked who would like to be involved, from which streets, from which sensors that were from the different participants. And with this, we did a series of co-creation workshops, and we came up with this visualization of the data, which we've done back in July, simultaneously in Barcelona and Madrid, which were the places where the Spanish case study took place. That was really interesting. We did an awareness campaign with the participants in their own street, stopping by people, creating awareness about traffic and about WeCount, and hopefully people will catch up, be interested, and keep working on this interesting project. So that was me. I will share the slides, of course, for your consultation. And here's my email, whatever question or if you have any doubt, if you want to connect with me, please feel free to send me an email. Once again, apologies that I cannot be there today, but Hannelore will respond to your questions. They've been doing amazing in Leuven, and they probably know better than me about WeCount more in general. So once again, thanks everybody, and I wish you a brilliant rest of the day. So thanks.
Right. So this is just a very brief preparatory presentation to prepare you for the group work. So I already saw a comment, can we see a practical application now? I think we're moving from theoretical throughout the whole session towards very, very practical. Well, now I'm going to show you just in a, I think, 10-minute presentation how we go about when we deploy Telegram network, either it's in WeCount or elsewhere. So how does Telegram look like in practice? I think the talk of Giovanni already made it very clear. Clearly scope your citizen science Telegram net community in the broader context of a project. So you can't just start from out of the blue. There's probably some kind of reason why you want to do this. It can be the monitoring circulation plan. It can be due to citizen activism on speeds or whatever. But you need to make this very clear, and you need to take sufficient time to scope what you want to do with your Telegram network. So make it clear, prepare this communication, make clear what's in it for the participants. So they're making an effort on installing this device and generating data, but what's in it for them? For example, they will be part of the policy development trajectory, the co-creation of the interventions. Express the expectations both ways. So that means, for example, you can, as a local authority, provide these devices for free towards the citizens, but then ask a commitment that they indeed also install this device and that you retain the right, for example, that if they are not installed, that after a month or so, you can recollect these devices and use them elsewhere. Because in most cases, at least in our experience, if we have a project with say 20 devices, we get 40 applicants and we always have to disappoint a few, but of these 20 which are selected, some will drop out, and then you can use these devices for other people. So make this clear, and you can ask for this commitment from participants that are selected. They will get a free device, but they will have to commit to install it as well. And then you have to think about how far do you want to go with the involvement. I think that what Giovanni's talk just now makes us very clear. We went in WeCount, we went quite far in the citizen engagement. That means that we also involved citizens in analyzing the data. You have to decide how far you want to go, yes or no. We see a lot of different experiences. Some local authorities just want to have data collected, that's it. Others will really want to explore with participants the results from the data and craft a policy together. So that's important. And then obviously, when you ask commitment from your participating citizens, also commit to your from your side as well. So if you commit that we are using Telegram to, I don't know, to evaluate an intervention after half a year or something and nothing is happening, you will get a lot of disappointed and activist citizens, which you don't like. So if you want to start with this, you have to go all in. So that's in on scope. Think about this on beforehand. And very practically, how do you onboard, how do you recruit participants? This is something also that Giovanni touched upon, how we did it in WeCount. What we always do is an online registration form. So people have to provide their information in an online information form where they live, because you want to select sites which are relevant for your project. You don't want to take just any kind of street. You also want to understand if they're eligible, yes or no. In our form, we have a mandatory field where we have people have to upload the picture from the window from their where they want to install the Telegram, so we can see indeed if they're eligible, yes or no, just to avoid waste of time. How do you recruit these citizens? Will you just have, do you have like a digital communication channel towards your possible participants? If it's like small local communities, then local authorities typically have a lot of communication channels available. The local community gazette or online, yes or no, a Hoppler group, a Facebook group, a WhatsApp group. Those are things that are good communication channels. But again, think if you want to reach people who are maybe more difficult to reach, or you want to target specific sites where you want to have a traffic data, then you might go to flyering and even going to house by house visits, for example, to recruit these participants also for your project. Again, think about what type of people you want to recruit. Is it like location based, or do you want to include, for example, tech-minded people only? bear in mind, it's still technology. So young techie people will be easier to acquainted with this technology, will be much easier to install this. If this is not a concern, you want to have a lot of support, then you can recruit broadly, but this is also something that you have to keep in mind when you craft and recruit your participants. So that's how we do it in Telegram, usually online form, and we rely on the communication channels of the client, basically a local authority, to get the word out. And yeah, we overshoot typically with, I don't know, 30% at least the candidates. So that you get, for example, 30 candidates for 20 devices, that you have some flexibility and also some choice options. Good. Then after you have scoped your project, you have recruited, let's say 30 participants, you have selected 20 of those. Okay, now what's the next phase? How do we support the participants in deploying their sensor and giving support if there's some issues which are evolving when they are getting started? Our approach has always been workshop, face-to-face workshop preference, like where you can really explain. You have some time to also interact outside of a one-directional communication, but you can also do this online. Our preference is to have this face-to-face, because then you can get a lot more engagement. But it's not just the workshop. You also want to support if there are technical questions. Again, with Telegram, we have a lot of resources available. We have an extensive FAQ, which is technical and non-technical in nature. We have instruction videos, all free to use. Obviously, they're all on the website. And what's important here is this one here, the help desk, including peer-to-peer. What we think that worked very good is that, especially if you have a geographically condensed network, for example, like a sub-municipality or an area in your city, there's always 1 or 2 or 3 people who are very enthusiastic and tech-minded, which are willing to help out other participants which are less tech-minded. So imagine the 40-year-old ITer, which is keen to help the 70-plus retired neighbor, which is just down the street. Well, just facilitate this peer-to-peer support, that this techie guy is also able to find and help the 70-plus retiree who doesn't know what Wi-Fi is, for example. So these local champions and help desk, that's really something that you have to think about and try to support. Again, how we do it is to facilitate this as much as possible. Then on sensor deployment, I just want to give an overview on how you can approach it and what we have encountered basically in how communities are dealing with this. So there are different approaches which go from, let's say, distribute the effort towards the citizen and to have a much more controlled approach. So we always push for this first approach. So we always push for let the citizen themselves, also for involvement, let them train them to install this device, to install this device themselves, so they also have a sense of ownership. This obviously has less work for you because you just have to train the participants, but there is some follow-up needed because it will not work with everybody. So you have to support, for example, via a local champion, and people will just have questions. I mean, I would think that from our experience up to this point, probably 2/3 will be able to install without issue, and then there's 20% which will have a question to various extent, one question or various questions, and then there's 1 in 10, that will just not manage and will either give up or needs very close support. So that's one approach that we push. There's another approach with these local champions. So you can really give a mandate, for example, to 2 or 3 local guys who are already, for example, in a mobility committee or something, or a citizen advocacy group, and you can give the work to them. So they can do, for example, the tour of all the selected participants, and they will install the sensor there on site. Something which is very nice if you have the level of commitment from a few people there. That's something which is very powerful. We've seen it work in 1 or 2 locations in our experience, and yeah, it's very nice. Obviously, you're very strongly dependent on this small group of people, and they're still volunteers. So be careful. with that approach. And then you can do it from within your own team. So you can, for example, take a municipality worker or the IT responsible of your municipality, or your NGO or university. It's interesting because you've got much more control, so you control the process, but it's more work. it's more work, and sometimes these people are also not the right man in the right place. So technical people may not per se understand what the broader processes of the project. Yeah, in some cases this might work. In other cases it doesn't, because they're in principle not per se super technical either. And then you can do it obviously yourself, but yeah, again, you can see like the flow from trying to distribute towards the citizens, which is really more citizen science, towards much more control. Yeah, our preference is obviously to do this, to give this to the citizens. And then the final step is how far do you go in data analysis? You can choose, you can involve the citizens up to the extent that they're part of the data collection process and part of the policy development process in which the project is embedded. But you can also involve the participants in the analysis themselves. And there's some quite nice examples that we've learned in projects where we basically were in charge of analysis, but that we found that some participants found some very nice data stories basically in the Telegram data that we wouldn't find if they're not involved themselves. So it really offers some opportunities, but also again, it's more time consuming. If you want to explain to citizens how to analyze Telegram data, you might be able to go less in depth, for example, because they're not per se data analysts. But again, you might find some stories, some relevance in the data that you would not find or from your desk where you're sitting. In WeCount, we've tried to engage the citizens directly also in the data analysis. And then, yeah, follow up, and it doesn't stop when your project is completed. For example, what we do now is project of, let's say, 5, 6, 7 months, maybe up to a year. There's a front-heavy focus in terms of effort of involving citizens and getting the devices up and running. Once they're up and running, then you have to provide some support. But typically, there's also an end date in the context of a project, for example. But then, of course, this community still exists, and these people, they still want to be part of it. They still have their device. Will you recollect their device? Will you allow them to keep counting with their device? Our advice always is to keep those. Keep the citizen science community alive, provide some support and nurture it, because you don't know what type of data they're still collecting in the future, and the coherence and the data gathering from the citizen science community is a really nice resource which you've put a lot of effort into to establish. So if you're nurturing it, you can use it also for future projects if you have planning something new, or if you just want to keep on monitoring the activities. So that's basically how we do it. If we work with Telegram, we scope our project in a bigger sense. We recruit people with an online form, but we communicate it via the local communication channels. We provide support, technical, non-technical project to the participants. Data analysis can mix up either self or with the participant itself, and we try to nurture the existing science communities, so to keep them alive, basically. And now the question is, how would you do it?
So thanks again for joining us in this useful, inspirational training, CIVITAS training. We would appreciate it if you could complete this evaluation form that's been sent out by email as well, or is going out by email as well. But so Annette is posting it in the chat as well. So thanks for completing it. We will send out handouts. That is upcoming. Yeah, I believe we have provided you with a hands-on introduction to citizen science and how to use this with data collection in an urban mobility context. That's been echoed. Yeah, so as mentioned, keep an eye out on civitas.eu, the Learning Center pages for upcoming learning opportunities. Yeah, I think that's all I had to say. So thanks all the speakers, Elke, Hannelore, Chris, Giovanni, of course, and you for all your participation. So thanks a lot. It was nice meeting you, and have a nice afternoon or evening at night. So thank you, and see you next time.